I hated it. I hated it. Oh, sure, I say I didn't like it particularly. I didn't get it particularly. There was something in there, and we all recognised that there was something in there, but that treatment didn't really bring it to life. We weren't really sure what we could do with it. I think I said at the time, well, why don't we do it with voices, no instruments, just all a tsunami of voices, wash of voices. Probably out of desperation, really, trying to come up with something to make this thing come to life.
I said, what do you mean a cappella? You know, we all sing without a backing. He said, no, the backing track. Let's do the whole backing track with voices, like a massive choir, the biggest choir you can imagine. I said, great. How do we do it? How do we do that? There's only 4 of us. And Lol said, tape loops. I said, great. All right, let's do it. And we spent 3 weeks recording 3 of them in the studio, Kevin, Lol and Graham, singing ah, as long as they could hold their breath. Then they did that 16 times on the 16-track machine, copied all that across to a stereo machine, and we had 13 notes to choose from, a chromatic scale with a top C and a bottom C, and 624 voices were there at our disposal. I then played them back through the 16-track machine, through the control desk, and I gave each of us a set of 3 faders to go up and down when the chords were changing for I'm Not in Love, and the little
All of us worked the desk and played it like a keyboard, and when we had all the notes playing together, you got that lovely abstract because it's a massive harmonics all bleeding together. So we kept them, all of the notes, in to a certain degree with a piece of masking tape, so that the faders were all at a certain level. And that's what made that in-tune harmonic sound, but with an extra something, and it made something really special.
Originally, I think we were going to do it with just voices, nothing else. So we recorded a rhythm track, which we thought was going to be a temporary. And I think the idea was that we'd sing to that and do all the vocals, then we'd take that off, and we'd be left with this song recorded with just the choir and the vocals. But there was something about it, there was magic about it. And of course, once we put the other voices on, we didn't want to touch anything, we didn't want to take it out.
I'm not in love, so don't forget it. It's just a silly phase I'm going through.
In the beginning, we were complaining that there were too many synthesizers playing on the 10cc original with the strange abstract tape hiss that we couldn't deal with since we first heard it on the radio. And when we were hearing the synclavier choir voices like that, to us, they sound terrible.
And eventually, I think it was Kevin that came up with the idea to do it in this different rhythm, which was much slower and moodier. And we talked about how we were going to record it, and I think it was Lol had the idea that we should do it with voices. There should be a lot of voices on it. And I think that the original idea was that we would do it completely with voices and no instruments at all.
Just going, ah, for 3 weeks. Because each note had to be recorded with just 3 people singing. As I said, there are 13 notes on a chromatic scale, and we had a 16-track machine, so we recorded the same note on 16 tracks to make 1 note. So 3 times 16, I've not got a calculator, but to do this. And then that note was then copied from the 16-track machine onto a stereo machine, and the stereo machine I then made a loop of the stereo machine.
Well, I remember particularly one of the big vocal R's, and we made this loop of tape, and we had it going through 2 tape machines, and then it went round in the control room, and at one corner there was Kevin holding a a cymbal stand, so the tape's going around that. Lol was in the middle, I was at the other end holding another cymbal, and we were trying to keep the tension, you know, and Eric was at the two machines. No, Eric was at the desk. I think Lol was at the two machine, and he kept saying, no, it's tighter, and we were moving back and forth. Crazy. This big loop going round, and that was doing that sound.
So that we didn't have the edit going through quickly, where it would go boop, 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 each time the edit hit. So on a long loop, you had for a long time without this little blip, and you didn't hear it. But once that was recorded, we had to do it 13 times, you know, for each note of a chromatic scale on a piano. And it took a long time. Then we had to take the risk to mix all those notes down to 2 tracks of the multi-track machine. And once we'd done that, I had to erase all these voices on the 16-track machine, so they were gone forever. So it was a risk, and we had to get it right. And it took 4 of us at the control desk to move the faders to change the chords of the song. Each time that the chord changed, one of us had, we each had 2 chords to change. 2 of us on this side, 2 of us on the back of the controllers, we're all moving like this. Those sort of things. That took a long time to get right. As I said, once we got it right, I had to erase all those loops of the voices.
So we said, why don't we do it with real instruments playing in our Philly Soul Ballad version of the 10cc tune written by Eric Stewart and Graham Gouldman to make it as a Philly Soul dancer instead of too many strange synclavier voices. Plus, the abstract tape hiss is no good for us.
Kevin said, why don't we do it almost a cappella, using totally, for the backing track, totally voices, all voices, not Beach Boys type of voices, just a wall of sound. I said, yeah, and how are we going to do that? And it was Lol who came up with the idea of making tape loops that we could run ad infinitum, forever. We'd just run them. So we spent another 3 weeks then recording 3 guys, Kev, Lol and Graham, just singing ah in the studio onto the 16-track machine. Each note had 16 tracks of 3 people, if you've got your calculator there. And we had to record a chromatic scale of 12 voices that would fit any chord in the song. We put the tape loops around this Studer stereo machine and then out to mic stands with little rollers on the top so the tape would run through there and we could tension the machine properly. Then I fed across to the 16-track machine and filled each of the 12 tracks with a separate note of these masked vocals. So I think eventually there were 256 voices on these tracks. And at the same time, we'd recorded a very, very simple backing track, stereo backing track, with me on electric piano, little rhythm guitar, and Kevin playing a bass drum on a Moog synthesizer, just to follow it.
I'm not in love, so don't forget it. It's just a silly phase I'm going through.
The 4 of us actually got around the control desk and started to feed the chords as they were changing within the song, up and down with the faders. And whilst we were doing that, I'd locked all the faders with a piece of gaffer tape, so they're all around about minus 24 on the faders. But because it was a chromatic scale, there was this lovely sort of hissing, breathy sound, like when you walk in a concert hall and people are just talking very quietly, but there's this wonderful hiss.
Now, as Eric mentioned, the vocals were recorded individually across the 16 tracks and then bounced down. Now, luckily, at the very, very front of this multi-track, there's the remnants of one of the tracks. So this is actually what one of the multi-tracked voice loops actually sounded like. So if I isolate that first... very slight blip you can hear, that's where the splice would have been in the loop. So although you can actually hear the loop as it goes through with the splice point, in this case, when you had the other 11 added, all at different splice points, the loop point would have been inaudible. So now if we start the actual multitrack up, you can hear what Eric was talking about, this sound that does sound like you're entering a cathedral or some hallowed space. And what we're hearing is a result of them playing the mixing console as if it was a keyboard come instrument. So each fader had one particular note on it. So putting, say, 3 or 4 faders up would create a chord. And as they knew what the chord progression of the song was, they could go through it bit by bit. They could, of course, drop in and out of the stereo track that I'm now playing to correct any errors in their mixing. So this final track is a result of all those man-hours of work. It's absolutely beautiful. The other addition is that there's a second track of the same thing but played at half speed, so that creates this low octave. This is particularly noticeable on the bit where it goes ha-ha, ha-ha. And you can hear both the high original pitched vocals and the low octave vocals.
So he said, nah, we can't do the whole backing track with strange and horrific synclavier choir voices. No, we don't want that. We want to do the whole backing track with instruments playing, and that's what we want. And Tom said, okay, let's do it. Let's make a Philly soul ballad record of that song instead of an epic record. Furthermore, we also said, instead of us singing the ah part to create the strange wall of sound, just like 3 members from that group named Kevin Godley, Lawrence Neil Krem, and Graham Gouldman in a British style that sounded so wrong, we wanted to sound like a decent family of backing singers named David Pack from the pop group Ambrosia, Royce Jones from that same group, David Lasley and Joanne Harris, or Myrna Matthews, Ashford and Simpson, Vivian Cherry, and Hilda Harris on backing vocals behind Dennis himself, who performed lead on that song in the style of David Pack from the pop group Ambrosia to create the American sweet soul pop sound so natural, so right.